Hi, everybody. I hope everyone's doing well. It's been a while, and I don't even know if this is going to work. I'm just trying to test out the equipment here. But if you're there and you're catching this, then fantastic. This will be uploaded afterwards as well. Sorry, it's a new toy I got for Christmas. I'm just trying to get the camera going properly. I've never had a good camera before, and so I hope that if anyone is there, you guys can hear me, see me, and all that kind of stuff. Right. So, thank you guys. Welcome back to the channel. I'm trying to get that. There we go. That's better, actually. that's whoa. I'm like knocking over everything in the office, and there. Okay. So this is a spare. This used to be my son Owen's room. Um, but he moved back to Canada permanently on December 5th. If you've seen any of my previous videos, you'll know that I talked about the fact he was working back in Canada this past summer as a chef. And so actually, he did a really great job. He was working with his cousin. That's my nephew on my husband's side of the family, who's about 11 years older than my son. Anyways, when he went to go work there for the summer, we didn't do anything with the room, but he came back to visit. When did he arrive? October 27th. And he was here until he flew out on December the 5th. But my husband and I decided we wanted to paint the room and make sure all of his posters were up on the wall. And we had a bed frame for a good for a double bed. And anyways, it is now officially the office / recording studio / spare bedroom / the room where our greyhound sleeps. He's got his dog bed on the floor next to the double bed. So sorry, I didn't mean to show you guys the fact that that the bed hasn't been made or that I haven't done anything with it. So I'm doing this for two reasons, because depending on where you happen to watch my videos from, you actually might be behind me. It's almost 2 o'clock here in the afternoon in Colchester, here in England. But then again, you also might be ahead of me. So if, say, you were in places like Australia, New Zealand, probably Thailand, I think you guys are almost 24 hours ahead of the time here, perhaps even more. And I don't know, I thought it might be fun to do a live stream and see who joins, even if it's just me doing this, just for fun, just for practice. And I've been watching quite a few of the videos that Professor Bart Kay has made, as well as his lovely partner, Pim Jansson. Sorry, I want to make sure it's not Johnson, it's Jansson. She's Swedish. He's from New Zealand. Anyways, they're both very cool. I didn't watch it live, but I just caught the live stream they did on their New Year's frequently asked questions and answers. And between the two of them, they're a wealth of so much knowledge with eating a carnivorous diet. Sorry, I say a lot, and I shouldn't do that. I think part of the reason why is I can only speak to what I've experienced and what has worked well for me. There are so many things I wish I had a deeper knowledge of that I could share as well, not to compete in any way, because there's nobody quite like Professor K, and there's nobody like him. I mean, we are all individuals, of course. What I mean is, I do firmly believe there is room for everybody on YouTube to share what they want to share, to say what they want to say, to, have their moment to speak their mind. There are some people, I believe, who should be banned because they are providing incorrect information, at the worst, misleading in best case scenarios. And if you guys are coming here either because you want to connect with someone who is also Christian, and you're here as part of the faith community, that's fantastic. But I would imagine most of you, or at least quite a number of you, have come here, have watched my videos, have commented and liked and shared your own journeys because you are also doing some sort of carnivorous type diet whereby you are consuming the meat of animals as God intended. And if you haven't heard me say this before, I hope you will hear this now. Those who often want to, whether they are of a deep faith or not, the response is, well, how do we know that's what God intended? If you read in Genesis, read through the book of Genesis, and certainly the first few chapters where God talks about, sorry, I talk with my hands. I apologize. I'm working on that. But God spoke to Moses, who then wrote down eventually the tale of the story of creation, whereby God created the animals on this earth, and we are over the animals. In other words, we are in charge of, we are the bosses of animals. And that includes the fish, the birds, anything that swims, any mammals like whale. Not that any of us really probably eat that sort of thing, but I'm just thinking in my mind, I'm just thinking about the Inuit who would eat whale blubber and the meat, and then of course they would make use of every part of a whale because they had to. That's what they must do in order to thrive and survive. They're not going to be picky about, oh, I don't like that part of it. They would learn to eat whatever part of it they had to in order to stay alive, right? And so that's their example. There are tribes like, I believe it's the Maasai tribe in Africa, who consume the blood of the animals as well as the flesh and perhaps even the organs. I'm not completely sure. I wish I was more knowledgeable of that information, but just based on things that I've heard and read, different influencers, if you will, some who have the scientific and research background to know this information, and others who simply don't, who have confirmed or have stated, I should say, that historical research would indicate that the ancestors of the Maasai, and even to where they are now, consume the blood of the animal, the flesh of the animal, that they probably boil up the bones of the animal for broth and consume the organs when they have to, because again, they do not, based on based on how they've chosen to live, they make use of every part of the animals that they kill. They will not waste anything. That, however, does not mean that we should all be consuming the blood or the bones or the organs of animals. That just means that there are some tribes who have done this in order to prevent wastage, and it is simply what they do now out of perhaps long history of tradition. That does not mean I need to go out and buy cow's blood and start drinking it at all, or sheep's blood. So, I mean, unless maybe you are into a black metal band and you want to make it look like you've performed some kind of sacrifice on stage while you perform, and so you pour out the goat's blood, the sheep's blood, or the cow's blood or pig's blood, even then, you typically wouldn't drink it. It was there to sustain the life of the animal it was once in. It was never designed for us to drink. And actually, if you look into the New Testament, where Paul is, Paul and the apostles were deciding what was necessary, say, for the Gentiles to become disciples of Jesus, they simply put out the rules of do not commit sexual immorality, do not drink the blood or consume the meat of animals that were sacrificed to an idol. That was it. So I would say you really don't need to worry about drinking the blood or any of that stuff. It's just that's just my point. That's just my thought on the matter. But there's so much out there right now about um, is organic better? Is this, organic versus not organic? And I didn't realize this. So here's information that I've learned, but organic really doesn't make much difference to how the food itself will break down in the body. And actually, in the UK, feedlots are not a thing. We don't have to worry about that. We're a small island. Whether we're talking about the Republic of Ireland, Northern Ireland, Scotland, Wales, or England, we are a small, massive land. And we simply don't have the population size and we don't have the numbers of people like the US does. Therefore, we don't need feedlots to begin with. So I feel really lucky. And in Canada, I don't believe feedlots are an issue either because as even though landmass wise, the square footage is actually bigger than the US, there's like 34 million people that live in Canada. And all of that land, the native country that I was born in, that I grew up in and lived in until we moved here 13 years ago, there's more land mass itself, and yet the population is a tiny fraction of the United States. And actually, the UK could fit several times just into Ontario, just into one small part of Canada, and yet we have more than double the population here in a very small space than the whole of Canada. So I'm just, putting it into perspective. And even then, even though, eating feedlot meat is clearly it's not great for the animals. It's not going to be ideal for us as people. However, one of the things that Bart Kay has pointed out in his recent video is that it's still meat. And overall, it's still a pretty good choice. It's still better than eating plants of any kind. And I would tend to agree with that. I was thinking today how much I wanted to get in touch with you guys, just talk to you guys and chit chat. And I think about one of the people that I follow, and that's Sheena's Ketovore Life. She's super cool. I believe she's in Oklahoma. She's a great, great lady. Always very positive, always encouraging, always completely there, right? But what I have found is that for me personally, I would much rather have not, and again, this is not an issue in the UK. I don't believe feedlots are an issue through Europe or through Canada, through any of the Western world. I think it's in particular, I think it's specifically a problem in the States because of the huge population they have. Now, from that perspective, I'm grateful to not have to be there because, yes, if you can get pasture raised or pasture finished, or whatever the definition is, um, then that's a good thing. And obviously, you're going to have less issues potentially with the cow. But the thing is, with cows, they have multiple stomachs. And so I would think that what's going to end up in the meat that's consumed is minimal. That would be my thought. That whether it is pasture raised and grain finished or pasture raised and grass finished, ultimately, these are cows that, because of their multiple stomachs and because they can break down things like grasses and seed, well, they don't really eat seeds, but like the grasses and all that cellulose that we as humans cannot digest. Seriously, eat a plate of leafy greens. Let me know how that works out for you and everyone else in the room. I would imagine not so well, right? Because we cannot break that stuff down. We're not designed to. God made the cows and other ruminants to be the same way. And these all ruminants have more than one stomach, which is why they can eat things like soy and corn and grasses, right? The stuff that the vegans and vegetarians are trying to convince us, oh, yeah, no, we can eat that stuff. Just because we don't die from it instantly doesn't mean we should be eating it, right? Like, not at all. If I was to, okay, so for example, if I was to put a bit of petroleum jelly on my lips because my lips get cracked and they get a bit dry in the wintertime, and I get a bit in my mouth. Don't ask me how. I'm just saying this is a what if this happens type thing, right? So just because just because I get some in my mouth and it doesn't kill me, doesn't mean I should start eating jars of petroleum jelly. Like, just because it isn't toxic if I accidentally get some in my mouth, doesn't mean I should be eating this stuff. And to be honest, plants are exactly the same way, you know? So, yeah. So one of the things I just wanted to share or talk about or mention was that I've had these moments, and you guys probably have too, but I've been having these moments where honestly, I feel like, have I even made any progress? Have I even gotten any better? Because I'll have these thoughts, these negative thoughts where I worry about, oh, I'm gonna start getting fat. I'm gonna start looking bloated. I'm gonna start getting massive. Um, my bulimic negative thoughts, and those are dark thoughts, and that's where Satan lies. And if I'm not careful, if I'm not praying and trusting and surrendering to God, those thoughts can come rushing in like you wouldn't believe. It doesn't matter what I understand intellectually. If I'm not walking with God and trying to be at peace and surrendered and trust him, my emotions take over. And you know what happens next? Then I start believing those lies. I may have been the one who cut out the carbs. I may have been the one who went carnivore. I did keto for about a month and a half, and then I went into carnivore because I realized I could not process any fruits or vegetables or anything else at all. I simply couldn't do it. My body couldn't handle it. And yes, some of that was the IBS. Um, Absolutely. Some of that was the fact that that was a big part of it, actually. These were all things that triggered my IBS: cereals and grains and pulses and lentils and seeds, legumes, all of those things, which interestingly, my GP, who would have had almost no training in nutrition whatsoever, suggested that I eat. And I don't care if they're labeled as being soluble. If you have IBS, please do not eat these things. We do not need the fiber. In fact, it made everything 1,000 times worse and very quickly. So I cut all of that out, like completely. And even when I had lost the weight, in my head, I would go to put, say, jeans on, and I know they fit and they're the right size, but my first thought is, yeah, but my butt looks huge, and why do I look like I'm bloated? And all these things that I'm positive are not actually true, but are remainders from my days of bulimia. When you are struggling through an eating disorder, in my experience at least, you have this warped version of what you think you look like in the mirror. And even if you're looking at a mirror and it's hung right and it's, you know, showing you your reflection, you could actually look great, but in your head, at least for me, I'm like, oh, I'm still 20 pounds over the weight I should be. Or, wow, everything looks wrong. Why do I look like I'm massive? I still worry, not every day, not all the time, but every now and then I will have thoughts such as, oh, you know what? I'm pretty sure I must be a 12. I can't possibly be a UK 8 to 10. I'm not that thin. I'm not that small. And I say that not because me being thin is the end all be all, but I know my triggers. And when I take my eyes off of God, when I stop praying and being grateful for what I've got and what I've done and where I'm at, um, all those negative thoughts, all those negative lies, and they're lies, and I know that they're lies. The problem is when you are, for me, when I am not not when I'm not letting myself remember all of the blessings in my life, when I'm not remembering that and I'm focusing on the wrong things, the lies all of a sudden become truth. And I don't know of any magic way to stop that from happening for like forever. The negative thoughts still creep in, but I'm learning how to deal with them a lot better, which I guess is really positive. Um, and watching Bart K's content is a big help because I just find it's very informative and he, in a great way, from science and fact, he tears down the lies that are being spewed by other people out there, such as, oh no, you have to have some carbs. No, you don't. And there are good carbs. No, there aren't. And the fact of showing that unless there is a scientific proof based on a reputable study, then everything else is just hearsay. And that makes it easier, you know, as far as the food goes. But I find when I take my mind off all the blessings that I have from God, it's so easy to get negative and so easy to feel like, well, I'm nobody, I'm nothing. What do I have to offer? What do I have to share with anybody? And the thing is, I'm not an expert. I do not have the mind to grasp the scientific know-how like Professor K does. And that's okay. That's not how I was made. I'm much more of a artistic individual, right? I come from a much more emotional perspective. And I have a hard time with math, and sometimes I need the science laid out very clearly and very simply in order for it to make any sense to me. Luckily, Bert does that with his videos. She talks about what she's been through, and some of the tips that she can offer if you want to quit carbs. Well, if you want to quit anything, really, that's an addiction, whether it's sugar, and carbs, and in my experience, they go hand in hand because any carb you eat, regardless of what kind of carb it is, ends up as sugar in your body anyways. And then it gets stored as fat, which is what we don't want, right? So there is that. Today, well, actually, for the past 2 weeks, so this is the second month that I have not had a cycle. There's nothing wrong. What I realized, and I'm not pregnant, um, but what I realized is that, and finally, I've been in perimenopause now for a few years, and now my body is finally heading closer to menopause. So while I'm looking forward to not having a cycle every month, I'm 50. I've been dealing with that since I was 13. And um, part of me keeps worrying, like, I get all these pop-up ads on my Instagram and Facebook feeds on what to do with menopause belly weight. And I think, oh my gosh, what if that's me? And I realized I don't have to worry about that. Why? Because I'm eating a meat-based diet. I am eating meat and egg yolks, water, some salt, and yes, I am fully admitting that I drink coffee, um, but it hasn't, as long as I know what my limits are and I keep it to 3 maximum of caffeinated coffee, and then I'll switch to tea or I might switch to decaf, but I also drink water throughout the day. So it hasn't seemed to have an overly negative effect on me. And you know what? I gave up everything else. So for right now, I'm going to keep drinking coffee. Does that mean it is recommended? Am I saying you should be drinking coffee? No, that's your call. And generally, I drink it black. If I go somewhere, I will get a cappuccino. But other than that, I drink it black when I'm at home and I enjoy it. So, so the coffee, okay. I'm mostly carnivore, mostly. I will sometimes eat a little bit of butter. I definitely cook with it. And sometimes, every now and again, I'll have a small piece of cheese. I seem to be tolerating cheese a bit better. I am lactose intolerant, but that seems to be improving. Why? Because I'm eating mostly meat. But what I also had to learn, because, okay, so let me backtrack. So I went carnivore and tried paleo and it was horrible. I had disastrous results. I had almost 3 weeks where I had no bowel movements because I was advised to eat nuts, avocados, and dark leafy greens. Worst things possible for IBS, like horrific. And you'd think I would have worked that out after the first few days, but I was convinced that if I just give it some time, it'll help because I needed to lose weight. So I'm 5'5", about 120 pounds. I think that's like, I don't know, 54 kilos, 53 kilos, something like that. But by the time we hit May of 2020, after all those months of lockdown and takeaway food or, fast food, whatever, um, excuse me, comfort food, and the fact that I was finally, I got a doctor to diagnose the fact that I was dealing also with hypothyroidism, that my triglycerides were through the roof. I was in the beginning stages of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which is not a good thing. And my weight was going up. I wasn't eating a lot, but what I was eating was all carby and sugary because I was convinced that, yeah, red meat's not good for me. We never had bacon in the house, and cereal porridge with fruit on top was the absolute right answer, which of course it's not. So what I would say is this. I was told that I had underactive thyroid, that I was headed towards Hashimoto's if I wasn't careful, but I wasn't giving really any ideas of what to do. And because of my back injury and my chronic pain and inflammation and fibromyalgia, I not only were the gyms not open to begin with, but I was in so much pain from all of these things. I couldn't just start doing aerobics in the living room. And I still can't, to be honest, because but at that point I thought move more, eat less, but I can't move more because of my injuries and my pain and my inflammation. And I've been trying to eat less. So now what do I do? And my sister-in-law went on a paleo diet to help her reverse her Hashimoto's. She didn't want to have to start taking um, thyroid hormone replacement medication. And it worked for her. And she lost, I don't know, 20 or 30 pounds. So I thought, why not? My husband and I were like, both agreed. Each of us could do with losing some weight. But by the time we finally got started, I was almost 200 pounds. Yeah. I weighed, I think I weighed more um, by the end of May of 2020 than I did even with my second pregnancy, which is a lot, which is way too much. I'm sure I must have been almost, yeah, I think I was about 200 pounds. But I didn't know how else to get rid of it. And the fact that I was constantly stressed and drinking a buttload of coffee, like way more than two or three. I was drinking coffee to the point where I was practically throwing up and restricting and all this messed up stuff that didn't work. And so there were two things I had to change. I had to find a different way to eat that would help me lose weight. I didn't even think that my pain would get better and go away. I just didn't want to be carrying all this on my joints. I didn't want to be carrying all this extra weight, feeling like I was 6 or 7 months pregnant when I wasn't, and just stuck with it. Like, oh, well, I guess this is all I can do. This is inevitable now. I didn't want that. So I found my way to keto and I just started to do it. I started trying it. I was watching somebody who talked about having collagen powder in her coffee and what the benefits were and so on and so forth. And so I bought myself some beef collagen powder. Now, people can do it or not, right? What I came to realize was that I didn't actually need that. All I had to do was eat the skeletal meat of animals, primarily the ruminant ones, so beef or lamb. I don't do well with pork except for sausages and bacon. And I don't do well with chicken typically, mainly because it doesn't make me feel satisfied. It doesn't have quite enough fat on it, and it's often really dry. So it's more of I just don't like it. And I don't find it filling. So that's why I say beef and lamb. All right, those are my go-tos. And initially, I did. I started putting collagen powder in my coffee, and it was great because suddenly I had great energy, and I found myself feeling a lot less hungry. And as I started to cut out the kale and the spinach that I was frying up in the pan and then adding eggs to. Yeah, I know, paleo. When I cut out the avocado and the dark leafy greens and I cut out the nuts and I started to eat more beef, suddenly that was it. That was, wow, like magic for me. It switched something. And I remember watching a video by Ken Berry. And one of the things he said was, eat the meat that you enjoy and that you can afford. Because even if it was lunch meat, like deli meat, that was still far better than a standard Western diet that was full of carbs and sugar. And I thought, oh, okay, so I don't have to go out and tell my husband, oh yeah, we got to buy steaks just for me. Now, for what I have found is, yes, I do enjoy a nice ribeye every now and then. However, I find that overall it's got too much, it's too high in protein. I do really well with fatty ground beef. Personally, I get the mince, well, that's what we call it, mince beef. Oh, I get the stuff that's 20% fat, and sometimes I will get stuff that's 23 to 25% fat, depending on if it's available. Most of the time, it's not there when I go to the store, so I just get the 20% stuff, and that works great. I have it with a couple of egg yolks, a bit of salt, and some crispy bacon, and I mix it all together in the pan, and there we go, we're done, right? So that was the first thing, was I had to start eating the meat. I had to not be afraid to eat the red meat. And I had to unlearn a lot of the things that I'd been told that I learned from my parents, from my friends, from the government, as far as, the recommended food guide and all these things that, in fact, were incorrect, that were not needed. And it took me a while to convince my family that I was not a complete nut job and, doing this weird eating thing. Oh, well, what about fiber and fruits and veg? And it's like, don't need it. Don't want it, don't need it. And I know that sometimes you guys may have people where, that might be easier to do than not. And there isn't a whole lot I can do about that. But the other thing I found was that by October, so between mid August and October, I was eating nothing but animal meat or animals and their products. So eggs, bit of dairy, you know, and the animal meats. And I was doing really well. And I remember there was a point, I think it might have been early October of 2020. And we were again in another lockdown at that point. And one of the things I realized was that suddenly I could remember conversations that had happened just beforehand. And I realized my brain fog was clearing up. And I also realized that I was struggling so much with the feelings I used to always get with my bulimia and the battle with myself to purge, and then I'd feel overwhelmed with guilt or sorry, to binge, and then I'd feel overwhelmed with guilt, so I would purge, and then I would still feel guilt, and so I would just restrict for days to make up for the fact that I had binged, and then of course I'd get hungry and the whole thing would start over again. And all those patterns and habits, those lies from Satan, they just kept coming. And I realized more than anything what I needed, really and truly, was I needed to start talking to God. I had to start to pray again. I had to start surrendering control of my life and realizing that the control I thought I had was just an illusion. And so for me, what's helped me these last 2 and a bit years is, yes, sticking to the foods that I know are helpful and healing, to keep carbs out of my diet. When I have slipped up, and I'm not saying I've never slipped up, because I have, and I'm not going to pretend I haven't. Like, I'm not going to be that person. But when I have immediately gone back to eating the meats, and so that was the first part. But I wouldn't have had the strength to keep going and to not give up if I wasn't praying and walking with God. And so that's what helps me. I've got a great family. We have a place that we can live in. We have clean water and electricity and heat and light, and we have food whenever we want it, either in the fridge or just down the road at the grocery store. And so when I remember those things, that helps put everything in perspective. And, you know, none of this is going to go away. But, oh, there's my spaniel Birdie. Hello, Birdie. He was just out being walked. But those are all incredible blessings. And I just think to myself, I could, at any point, I could eat a cookie or a piece of cake or whatever. But why would I want to do that? Why would I want to go back to a time when my brain was fogged up and clouded? Why would I go back to a time when I was inflamed and in so much pain that even my meds weren't helping? I don't want to go back to that, right? But I get it. It's hard, right? These are all also very addictive things. And so it's not like you get rid of those feelings fully, but I know that praying helps and realizing I can't do it on my own. I can't stop by myself, that God is my higher power. And that's what's helped me. So I don't know if this is of any help to you guys. I just thought, you know what? I'm not an expert of any kind. I'm not. I mean, I'm an expert in my life and my mistakes and what I've learned. And I just really hope that this could be helpful to you. So thanks for the likes. Thanks for everybody who maybe came or who's going to watch this after the fact. It's great. And I hope it's helpful. I hope you guys have good days and just keep going, keep doing it, moment at a time, a day at a time. And, I think what I want to do is offer a place where we can have support for those of us who struggle with food addictions or eating disorders, and we're trying to keep our recovery. I want to set up this space and have it be a place where we can help each other, connect and support each other and offer our own journeys and things that worked for us or things that didn't work for us. And hopefully we can help inspire each other to keep our faith in God, to carry on in our lives with prayer, and of course, with staying healthy and keeping the meat, getting rid of the carbs. Anyways, that's it for me, guys. Have yourselves a fantastic day. I'll see you soon. Bye for now.
Bye.
Hey, bud.